Welcome to the Psychology World podcast with me, Connor Whiteley, psychology student and international best-selling psychology author of over 30 psychology books, bringing you the latest psychology news, fascinating psychology topics and more each week. If you want to learn more, then please check out connorwhiteley.net/books. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the YouTube video or follow on your favourite podcast app. And here's the show. Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 308 of the Psychology World podcast with me, Connor Whiteley. And today's episode is on what is Obsessive Compulsive Disorder. And it is the 1st of February 2025 as I record this. In today's podcast episode, you're going to be learning about OCD, Obsessive Compulsive Disorder, and by the end of this podcast episode, you're going to be learning about what is it, what are the symptoms, what causes OCD, but also how is OCD treated. So it's a really in-depth, really fascinating podcast episode that you're going to flat out love, because the unfortunate thing about OCD that it's one of those mental health conditions that does tend to be thrown around and used very loosely, which irritates the hell out of me, because OCD is a very distressing condition that really does impact the lives of people who actually have it. So the fact that we're minimizing it through saying, oh, I'm just a little OCD, that is not good, and that is delegitimizing the very distressing experiences that lots of people have. So, but you've got that to look forward to in the content part of today's episode. So, moving on to the psychology news section, we're reading from the British Psychological Society Research Digest, and the first one is, do honesty oaths really make us behave honestly? Could simply making a promise to be honest encourage people to behave in an honest way, even when there's a temptation to lie? A recent study in Nature Human Behavior suggests that it can, but the precise nature of the promise matters. Using a tax evasion game to measure dishonesty amongst 21,000 participants from the US and the UK, Janice H. Lickfield and colleagues tested the effects of 21 different oaths on participants' eventual honesty about their earnings. A quick lie could avoid a high in a tax game without repercussions, but 10 specific phrases were key, held the participants back from fibbing. And there's only two paragraphs that I'm going to read here. However, the remaining 10 oaths did boost income honesty. The most effective of these almost halved the lost tax from 11.6% compared to 21% in the no oath control group. The winning oath explicitly linked honesty to reported income. I hereby declare that I will apply honest income when reporting my final income from the sorting task. Other effective oaths included statements that framed honesty as being all or nothing, even though reporting is honest or it is not, or specific social costs of dishonesty, such as a reduction in funds that will go to the Red Cross. These clear specific statements make it harder to the participants to justify lying about their income to themselves, the same things. So I think this is a brilliant example of a cognitive psychology researcher mixed in with a social psychology, because this definitely has implications for the real world, and this is very, very much applied psychology research. Of course, I will say roughly up front here that one of the main issues with this study is that, of course, it doesn't really have much ecological validity, because tax evasion in the real world is a lot more complex. And the research sample were not millionaires that have even self-made their millions. That, or this is a family money, and I do think that would make a difference in the real world. However, the interesting thing here is that it shows that words do matter. That, and if we give people options and if we frame stuff in like a certain ways, then this is much more likely to have the behavioural effect that we want to. For example, if we frame honesty as all or nothing, then that means that people do not have any wiggle room to manipulate themselves or basically lie to themselves, because people always want to maintain a positive self image. Also, if we think about social costs, now this one I would like to see a difference between the rich and the poor, or to be honest, normal people and the super rich, that I would be interested in, because I don't know if the super rich would care about social costs as much, especially money going to the Red Cross, because of course that only helps poor people, and I very much think that some super richer people would think like that. So I think this is a very interesting study. I think that this is going to provide a lot of good like groundwork. I would like to see a bit more ecological validity for the future. So the second one is when autism and menopause collide. Menopause can be a challenging time, marked by wide-reaching hormonal, psychological, and physical changes. These changes can interact with a host of pre-existing medical and mental health issues, exacerbating them further. Autistic people often report that menopause brings additional changes too. For some, this shift may lead them to realize that they're autistic for the first time, with symptoms becoming too obvious to ignore. A recent study orchestrated by Christine Jenkins and colleagues explores the experience of autistic people going through menopause. Their paper, published in Neurodiversity, highlights autism-specific barriers to navigating this transition period, providing practical solutions for clinicians to better support the unique needs of neurodivergent participants. There's actually not a lot that I can actually say about this psychology article, except from the fact that, yes, if autistic people do experience unique challenges during the menopausal period, which is what this study shows, then yes, we do need to find solutions to help them decrease their distress and make this a transition period as easy as possible, even though I know the menopause is not an easy period on anyone. So yep. So I definitely say that we need to adopt these solutions and these practical suggestions, so we can help improve people's lives. So the last one is mothers report taking the brunt of household mental load. Year after year, we hear that women believe that they're taking on more than their fair share of domestic labour. Recent statistics reveal that 63 of women report doing more than their fair share of household labour compared to 22% of men, despite the fact that more than three quarters of our people believe chores should be split equally. Now writing in the Journal of Marriage and Family, researchers from the universities of Bath and Melbourne look at another facet of domestic life: cognitive household labour. This refers to the mental effort that keeps families going, things like scheduling appointments, planning tasks, and generally keeping track of what needs doing. They find that mothers are also bearing the brunt of this kind of workload, which potentially has knock on effects on their careers, relationships, and overall well being. Okay, now I've got two things to say about this. So, firstly, focusing on mothers themselves. Let's just say, running a family, that is hard. It's a lot of work. You've got to juggle a million and one things. And I think that it's very ridiculous. I think it's very outdated. Men and women, whatever your relationship is very much a case of women should be doing most of the work. That I think is very outdated. I think it's a societal shift that we need to continue. Just the men and women do actually do equal amount of like work, so because that's better for everyone. It's better for everyone's mental health. And it's just healthier, to be fair. That's the basic takeaway. And I think that the more than three quarters of people who believe chores should be split evenly, that I think is an interesting takeaway because it does highlight that yes, people can believe stuff, doesn't mean they're actually going to do it, especially if there's nothing that's actually driving that action. Also, I would say that there is probably some social desirability bias here, though, because if you're a man or if you're a woman taking a part in psychology research, then you are going to guess, even subconsciously, what the answer was. And to be honest, you don't want to look like a misogynist or someone who has outdated beliefs. So that's just something to bear in mind. Also, I know in last academic term, I very much positioned myself as the personal assistant of like of the house. So I would keep like a track of stuff. I would schedule a appointments. I would basically be people's calendar. And it's only this term, because it's not been happening, I realized, oh yeah, that was exhausting. Like, yes, I did it happily, and yes, I never complained, but I didn't know it was quite taxing for me. To be fair, I definitely understood that. So, mothers, I think you're amazing as always. So it's just something to bear in mind. And I think that the ultimate takeaway from the end of this psychology news article is just maybe talk up with your partner, maybe look at your own life, your own household, and go, right, am I doing more than my fair share? How is this impacting me? How can I improve my life? And then ask for help, and then think about how would you change this up, just so you can not have knock on effects for your relationships, careers, and overall well being. So, I hope you enjoy the psychology news section. So, let's move on to the personal update. So, we're moving on to the personal update. So, this week has been very hit and miss, but it has been absolutely brilliant for a lot of different reasons. So, I've finally done my introduction for my latest mental health study. I procrastinate so badly about this stuff because I give myself way too much to do on my to-do list. I struggle to get it done, and then I have to prioritize. So thankfully, I've now got my introduction done. And to be honest, there is no time limit. To be fair though, so that's just something that I wanted to bear in mind. And I think the thing about academic writing, the thing about research is that once you get into it, it can be a lot of fun. For example, I've been looking up tons of post-transition mental health papers. So I didn't realise there was a lot more than what's all thought is actually being done, and they do pose a lot of very interesting questions. And because I've done my data analysis slightly before I did my introduction, or well, a proper look at my introduction, it was interesting to see where my research has built upon the current literature, but also where can it improve and where can it add to the literature. So that's interesting, and I really did enjoy that. And that, and just I do quite enjoy reading papers. Of course, never full papers, but I like reading the abstract specific sections, and it is very, very interesting. And I do flat out love psychology research at times. Also, I've been doing a lot of like outreach work. I've still been doing my reading support. I did I did a year of 8, so that would be like year 13 students. So I was like lead on that. And the thing that I like about doing lead and doing some sort of like school events specifically is that you really do get to see the more leadership side of that stuff, though. And I like management. I like making sure that events and days run smoothly. Most importantly, I like talking at like staff and students and just being the sort of the responsible adult. So that's something that I find quite relaxing and quite fun. And I also know that it's going to teach me a lot of life skills in the future. future that I can mention on my CV, and hopefully the Deacon Insight application. Speaking of which, I have brought a book by Dr. Marianne Trent, who is the host of the Aspiring Psychology podcast. I really do recommend her that, and she's written a book a few years ago now called the Aspiring Clinical Psychologist Collective, and that's a really good book because it brings around 20 people who have gone on to the doctor of clinical psychology, spoken about their journeys, just so I can get some inspiration and other stuff, because I do want to apply, maybe not this year, but definitely next year, and I want to see how can I either blag my current experience, and most importantly, how do I actually get more egg experience that's actually going to be valuable to whoever reads the Deacon Insight application, even though it will take me a few years to get on. And then there was the research module yesterday, which was a lot of fun, because the girl who I was presenting with basically said, we're doing methodologies and data analysis, you do psychology, the only student that we have is sociology students, so please just please just present and be happy. And I flat out loved it. It was really fun talking about methodologies, the different sorts of data sets, the different sort of research methods. Yeah, but then also how does this apply to my own research? Because the great thing about procrastinating so much about doing your own research and doing your own write up of the paper is that because I do it on a Thursday and I teach this module on a Friday, it means that I actually get to do stuff, and it's actually fresh in my head though, so that's a lot of fun. And I do really like teaching, which I'm quite surprised about because when I get in the flow, I'm actually a really good presenter. So sometimes I think, oh, should I do that for a living? Then I'm like, no, because I don't want to become a lecturer. Even though I slightly do, to be fair. But then you need a PhD for that, and I don't want to do a PhD. I want to do a practical PhD so I can become a fully qualified doctor. Yeah, so that's something for the future. So as always, I always love to hear your thoughts and feelings on today's episode. So you can always email me, connorwhiteley@connorwhiteley.net. You can always leave comments at the show notes at connorwhiteley.net, and you can always tweet on Twitter at sci-fi whiteley. I always love to hear from all of you because it really helps make the podcast feel more like a conversation. And you can also leave a comment on the Facebook post, LinkedIn post, or Blue Sky. And also, feel free to send pictures of where you're listening from all over the world, because I love to see where you're all are listening from. And today's episode has been sponsored by my brand new book, Introduction to Psychotherapies, a clinical psychology introduction to the types of psychological therapies. So the reason why I flat out love about this book is because it's a very interesting, a very fascinating look at how mental health conditions are treated. Because traditionally, at least in the UK, there's such a massive focus on cognitive behavioural therapy, which I don't really have a problem with, and I understand the business reasons why our National Health Service does use CBT, because it's evidence based and it's good value for money. But CBT doesn't work for everyone. So what are the other options after that? So that's why this great, really easy to understand book helps you to understand the advantages of EMDR, dialectical behavioral therapy, couples therapy, family therapy, and a whole bunch of other systemic approaches, as well as a bunch of third wave CBT stuff. Plus, we also look at psychodynamic therapy, art therapy, affirmative therapy, culturally sensitive therapy, and so many more. I think we look at 24 in total. So it's a brilliant book. I flat out loved it. I really do recommend it because this is just such an engaging book that I had so much fun writing up. And people are already learning a lot from it. So I really do recommend it. There's Introduction to Psychotherapies, available from all major ebook retailers. You can order the paperback and hardback version from Amazon, local bookstore, or local library if you request it. Several by buying books helps to support the creation and the editing of the podcast. My time is sponsored by my wonderful patrons. And as a part of my continuation of me focusing back on Patreon, I've uploaded even more blog posts to be released up until the end of February. But to be honest, I know I probably have enough psychology posts which are not going to be made in the podcast episodes for months or, to be honest, even years up until the end of March. So there's a lot of great content coming that you can only get through Patreon, though. And lots of it focuses on sexual trauma, different forms of psychotherapy, morality, psychology, and a whole bunch of other topics, which I flat out love. Love those, so I really do recommend it. So, if you want access to tons of great rewards, and if you want to become a part of the Patreon community, then please head on over to patreon.com/the Psychology World podcast. And as always, a massive thank you to my patrons. Your support shows that you like the show and you want it to continue. Or if you want to support the podcast on a one-off basis, now you can at buymeacoffee.com/Conor Wiley. So that's enough of the personal update. Let's move on to the content part of today's episode. So we're moving on to the content part of today's episode. So we're going to be talking about what is obsessive compulsive disorder. This is a fun podcast episode that I really did enjoy because I have got some personal experience with it, or at least how this impacts other people's lives. So I really do recommend it. This is going to be a lot of fun. So let's dive into it. What is obsessive compulsive disorder? So OCD is a mental health condition where someone experiences unrelated, unwanted thoughts, images, feelings, and actual sensations, obsessions, and they engage in mental acts or behaviors, compulsions in response. It is typical for someone with OCD to carry out their compulsions to temporarily eliminate or reduce the impact of their obsessions, as well as if a person does not perform these compulsions, then this causes them additional distress. In addition to similar mental health conditions, OCD varies in its severity, but if a person doesn't receive treatment for the condition, then it can limit their ability to function at work, school, or home. Some examples of compulsions and obsessions can be the stressing thoughts and the idea of food going bad, so the person seals the food in a very particular way, and if there is a mistake, then they believe that they're going to die. Or if a person holds distressing beliefs around their family going to get hurt by someone breaking into their house, then they might check that their doors are locked over and over, leading them to be late for work. So I didn't use typical examples there because I want you to understand that OCD is way more than hands are washing and obsessions about being clean. Moreover, in the United States, OCD is estimated to impact around 2% of the population, and it is often co-occurring with other mental health conditions, for example, depression, anxiety disorders, as well as eating disorders, with the condition typically manifesting for the first time in childhood, adolescence, or early adulthood, as well as up to 30% of people with OCD have a tic disorder, according to the DSM-5. Personally, as an aspiring clinical psychologist, I'm always interested when mental health conditions tend to occur together because it raises important therapeutic questions. For example, is the OCD maintaining the eating disorder, or could the anxiety disorders be causing the OCD, or vice versa? These are important factors to think about when treating someone with OCD and another mental health condition. What are the symptoms of excessive compulsive disorder? So, as much as I passionately dislike the DSM-5 for a whole host of reasons that I've explained in other places, when it comes to OCD, the diagnostic criteria says that compulsions and sexual obsessions have to be present. Firstly, the DSM-5 defines obsessions as reoccurring urges, thoughts, or images that are experienced as unwanted and intrusive, and for most people, they are distressing or induce anxiety. Then the person tries to suppress, ignore, or neutralize them with a different action or thought. Secondly, the DSM-5 defines compulsions as repetitive mental acts or behaviors that a person feels compelled to do because of their obsession or strict rules around something. The idea behind these compulsions is to counter anxiety, distress, or to prevent a feared situation or event, even though the reality is that these compulsions are not realistically connected to the outcome, or the compulsions are excessive. For example, it is reasonable to assume that milk that is 2 or 3 days past the best before date might be off. I will fully admit that. So you need to check it. But it is obsessive to throw away milk the night before the best before day because you truly believe that you're going to die if you drink the milk tomorrow. In addition, the DSM-5 includes other information in the diagnostic criteria. For example, the obsessions or compulsions take up more than 1 hour a day, cause impairment for the person, and or they cause clinically significant levels of distress. Then there is the wonderful typical DSM-5 caveat. Now, I say that jokingly because I know this is actually an important caveat. That OCD needs to be the best explanation for what the client is experiencing, and their symptoms cannot be better explained by another mental health condition or medical condition or a substance. Also, when it comes to the obsessions themselves, the specific details of them can vary wildly between people with OCD. They can include thoughts around contamination, a desire for order, or they can be taboo thoughts around harm to themselves or others, sex, ancestral religion. Again, OCD in the real world is so much more than washing hands. Furthermore, it is worth noting that compulsions aren't always observable to other people. Like people with OCD might not always rearrange or count objects, check their concerns, or wash things. In fact, some compulsions cannot be seen by others, but the whole point of compulsions is that they ideally offer someone temporary relief from the intense feelings caused by their obsession. People with the condition could avoid certain places, things, or people that trigger their obsessions and compulsions, as well as they can often have dysfunctional beliefs that can include an intolerance of uncertainty, a heightened sense of responsibility, perfectionism, and an exaggerated view of the importance of troubling thoughts. Personally, one of the many ways how OCD has impacted my life as someone who lives with someone with the condition is around cleaning, food preparation, and whatnot. Since I'm not allowed to do the cleaning in the kitchen, I'm only allowed to clean my things because I do not clean in the very specific way that my housemate's obsession and compulsions allow. Even though after the OCD relationship and other things came to a head last week, after I write this blog post, I'm actually gonna go and help clean other people's things. Also, it's very tragic things to say, but my friend's OCD was a core factor why my anorexia has gotten this bad, due to the needing the food prepared in a very, very specific way, them getting extremely anxious around eating to the point where I was scared to go into the kitchen in case I made a mistake, and the evening became so unpleasant for me. Granted, I was still dealing with my rape trauma, PTSD, my own mental health at the time, but I didn't need the added stress of OCD and getting scared to cause my friend so much intense distress. This is why OCD can definitely impact other people, and if I take the systemic approach for a moment, then I can see how the OCD has caused the disruptions and negatively impacted our household unit. Going back to the content, people with OCD vary in their insights into the condition. Some people with OCD have a good inner side because they recognize that OCD related beliefs are not actually true. For instance, these people can understand that wrapping up opened ham in a tinfoil in a very specific way will not help them not die from contamination, whereas other people with OCD do not have such good insight, so they believe their compulsions and obsessions are true. Finally, like other mental health conditions, the severity of OCD symptoms can vary over time, but the condition can persist for years or decades if not treated. What causes OCD? Briefly, whilst the causes of OCD are not fully understood, we know that there are both genetic and environmental factors. For For example, people that have family members with obsessive compulsive disorder are more likely to have it themselves, and twin studies show that there is a genetic influence in the development of OCD, as well as sexual or physical violence and other forms of trauma are associated with greater risk. How is obsessive compulsive disorder treated? So, in next week's podcast episode, I'm going to be focusing on how a person's support system can support the individual with OCD. But professionally, obsessive compulsive disorder can be treated in several ways. It can be treated using psychological or medical interventions, and sometimes these approaches can be combined. For example, cognitive behavioral therapy can be used in a very specific way in a program called Exposure and Response Prevention. In exposure and response prevention, a person with OCD is guided by a therapist and exposed to things, situations, and thoughts that produce anxiety or lead to obsessions as well as compulsions. Then, over time, the person learns not to engage in these habitual compulsions. Ultimately, exposure and response prevention aims to, over time, reduce the anxiety of these obsessions produce once they're triggered by certain people and situations. Then, this allows the person to better manage the OCD symptoms. Medically, OCD can be treated using serotonin reuptake inhibitors or selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. Now, if you go to the blog post, there will be some names of drugs. I am not even going to try and pronounce them because I cannot pronounce these names to save my life. And yes, I should look it up, but I'm actually under a time pressure when I'm recording this. So going back to the blog post, this is believed to help treat OCD because it increases the neurotransmitter serotonin in the brain, and it is commonly used to treat the depression and anxiety disorders. But it typically takes 12 weeks to produce an improvement in symptoms when used to treat OCD. Yeah, I always recommend reading Read and Moncrief 2022 because they show how useless antidepressants are at treating depression, and there is no science behind them by modern standards. Personally, I think the idea of using SSRIs to treat OCD is ridiculous because compulsions and obsessions are psychological elements. There are no biological bases here. Obsessions and compulsions are not cancer cells that you can target. They are not a virus. They are inside a person's head. Therefore, you need to work and target the person's mind through psychological interventions. Also, if SSRIs worked so well, why do they actually need 12 weeks to cause an improvement? Of course, psychological therapies can take 12 weeks, but it can be done by that time. And by the end of the 12 weeks, you can actually arm a client to have enough adaptive coping mechanisms that they're set for life. SSRIs you need to keep taking for life. Finally, one of my friends with OCD, not the one that I live with, he's going through a CBT for OCD at the moment, and he's almost done. When we were talking, and I started to see improvements in him after 4 weeks. That's a lot shorter than 12 weeks. Just saying. Conclusion. So, I know what it's like to live with someone with OCD. I hate seeing my friends so distressed, having so much anxiety, and struggling with their functioning. Also, I was surprised how much OCD can impact the lives of other people, including friends, housemates, and loved ones. Therefore, I am glad that I now have a deeper understanding of OCD. It helps make me more understanding, and it means that I can learn and put myself in their shoes. I am far from perfect, but I want to try and understand other people. As a result, at the end of this podcast episode, we understand that OCD is a mental health condition where someone experiences repeated unwanted thoughts, images, feelings, and sensations, obsessions, and they engage in mental acts or behaviors, compulsions in response. And typically, these compulsions are used to temporarily eliminate or reduce the impact of their obsessions. And if someone doesn't perform these compulsions, then this causes them additional distress. Finally, if you are guilty of this, then it is okay because you're human and we can all change. Yet please stop saying you're a little OCD unless you actually have the condition. By saying these things, you are minimizing the intense distress and anxiety that people with real OCD experience on a daily basis. And if we continue to minimize it, then people don't treat OCD as the serious condition that it is, and a condition that we need to treat. Also, people with OCD can decrease their anxiety and psychological distress, improve their lives, and develop more adaptive coping mechanisms. That is the lifeblood of a clinical psychology, and that is why we must stop minimizing a terrifying condition that causes so much distress to people every day of their lives. So I really hope that you enjoyed today's episode and you got something out of it. I know that I did because I did want to understand more about OCD, how to support people with OCD, and just how you meant to treat it from the support system and network when you're not professionals. But that is something for next week. If you know anyone who would enjoy today's episode, then please share it with them. I'm always really grateful when you wonderful people help spread the word about the podcast. And please check out Introduction to Psychotherapies, a clinical psychology introduction to types of psychological therapies, available wherever you buy books. And if you want to get access to tons of great rewards and become a patron of the show, please head on over to patreon.com/the Psychology World Podcast. Or if you want to support the podcast on a one-off basis, now you can buymeacoffee.com/Conor Whiteley. So have a great day, everyone, and I'll see you next time. Found it helpful. Please remember to like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel and follow the podcast on your favourite podcast app. And if you wanted to learn more, then please check out the backlist of the podcast episodes or my books at conwhiteley.net. So have a great day and I'll see you next time.